Hey guys, ChessMobster here. It's nice to see you, chess dogs. This will be my first YouTube video, and this will be my first series called The Power of the C-File. I'm going to go over, in this series, I'm going to go over 3 games, 2 from Great Masters, exploiting the pressure of the C-File, and then 1 game where I try to harness it in these kind of structures that I'm going over. We're going to look at a Queen's Gambit declined, a Colle, and I think Queen's Indian. And the first game we're going to go through is Pillsbury versus Mason, 1895. And they start with d4, getting some of the center. Every move I'm going to try to articulate what they are really trying to do with this move at the best of my ability and my insights in like particular moments. So start with d4, d5, c4, doing a nice Queen's Gambit. And here, they could do dx c4, etc. Start with e6, kind of a Queen's Gambit declined. Knight c3, typical, trying to harness pressure on this pawn. Keep going. Knight f6, bishop g5, exploding this pin. Bishop e7, trying to unpin. Knight f3, b6. And c, I'd say more in this like modern time, you don't see b6 like right away. Usually you see like c5, dx4, c6, castle, all viable. So like, you'll see this, or this, or this, or this, or this, or this. But we get a b6, so like an early fianchetto of the light square bishop. We go e3, trying to get more structure, more strength in the structure. Bishop b7, rook c1. I always love this move because he's already trying to plan like bishop d3, maybe even a eventual bishop b1. It's also just great pressure along the c-file. Again, we see the power of the c-file. Cdx c4, bishop x c4, knight bd7, getting all the squares into development. Then we see castle, castle. And this is a very nice middle game position. If we look at the eval, it's very equal. We keep going. Now, this is a very critical moment, in my opinion, or like, I'd say it's like now it's more to the opening to the middle game. And what I've really liked about Queen e2 is many D players, such as myself, always have to ascertain if Queen e2 or Queen c2 is more viable in positions like these. I've seen the power of both. Typically, if the white bishop is on c4, I will prefer like bishop e2 because even there may be like potential bishop a6. Also, if like the black bishop eyes knight f3, which it does in this line, it's kind of smart to keep it on e2 to like not mess up your pawn structure. They take the knight. In other positions in games, I'll explain why like queen c2 is probably more viable. Also, when the c-file opens up, we may not like our queen on c2 with the rook, their rook eyeing ours. So I think queen e2 is more viable in position, and Pillsbury does too. We continue off, do knight d5. This is a very like common maneuver. You can see it in different move orders. And so usually you can do like bishop h4, but not really in this scenario. You kind of have to take on e7. Takes on e7, queen take, knight x d5. And this is actually a really important capture because after knight x d5, ex d5, if you're wondering why you can't take with the bishop, bishop take, ex d5, you get the rook, you get the pawn in the end. So that's why you can't take the bishop, so you have to take with the e-pawn. So already showing that power of the c-file, bishop b5, making sure that he can't go c6, and he can't even go c5. Well, he could go c5 at the moment, but he kind of like fixes the position more. And then now he makes sure he tries to protect this c-pawn. We do rook c2. So yeah, we want to make sure to like showcase this. If he went c5 in this line, we can do bishop x d7, queen x d7, dx c5, bishop x c or bx c5, and then rook x c5. Again, taking the c-pawn, just in a different line, a different way. So queen d6 does make sense. We continue off. Does rook c2, trying to double up. c6, finally trying to get like some like pressure away from this like knight and like just c-file in general. So bishop d3, I really like this move more than bishop a4. See knight f6, rook fc1. Now it's kind of just fixing this pawn because you can't take. And then rook ac8, bishop a6. I see this is such a great, you want to get your queen. It's such a great middle game maneuver, and you'll see this a lot in these kind of structures. And so now if he takes, which he does, because you want to strengthen your queen position, and then you favor this trade. And now it's still not fixed because, I mean, you can just take the e7 pawn. So he has to kind of worry about like multiple threats here. Rook c7 is the move he made. This seemed like a good idea when you think about it, but it's actually smarter to go knight d7. It kind of holds more concrete because it sacks a pawn for the c5 thrust, which is a common idea in these structures and most like d4 openings. You want to play c5 as much as possible, even if it means sacking a pawn sometimes. So like let's look at knight d7, queen x a7, rook a8. That's queen b7, and then here now you get c5 then. So this queen is kind of more off center now, not on a6, and you finally get this like structure where it's like, hey, I have two pawns compared to your little like two wing pawns. White would still be like slightly maybe like small. Oh no, it's actually completely even. That was like maybe like 0.2, but it's pretty equal. So this is what would have been preferable, but rook c7 was not the best move. But if you think about it, white has just been controlling this entire game, and sometimes when you do that, you let your opponent self-destruct like this. Knight e5, exploiting the c-pawn again, and then they crack in c5 in the worst like possible moment with all the pressure mounting. And then this is such a great pin because when you can't take, because then you take with a queen. So you have to take with a rook. You take with a rook. Still pin is still powerful. And then he does a knight d7. So this actually looks a little bit like, you know, I feel like I'm winning this game. I think Frank Marshall said something like this. He said the hardest thing in chess is to win a one game. This has the opponent set up an idea. If the knight trades, this endgame is hard to win. They're just up a pawn, white is, so this would be a little bit harder. So Pillsbury plays rook c6, getting a tempo on the queen. Does knight b8, trying to trade queens for queen, which he does go for because he does win another pawn. He doesn't. The one thing I did love about Pillsbury in this game is he didn't rush for this d-pawn. It still would have been like winning, but by doing this, he already gets more pressure on like this e7 square, on this a7 pawn. He's just threatening like two pawns now, so it's really smart. And you can't play after knight c6, g6. He can't play rook 8 to defend, which is very important because you can still play knight x a7. Like let's say he didn't play g6. Played rook a8, you can still play knight x a7 because of the back rank. So this knight c6 idea is very genius by Pillsbury. We continue. Two pawns by now. Knight c6, king g7, trying to get the king into. a3, stopping even more movement, but wasn't really needed at this moment, but it makes sense. I did like the discipline, though, in this move, as you don't always have to pawn grab. Again, he's just not taking the d5 pawn, relaxing. It's very nice. c8, g4, knight c7, just gradual improving moves by Pillsbury. Attacking the rook. He just says, no c-file. You will not get c-file this entire game. Rook b8, rook d7, knight e6. Now he takes on d5. Probably in a better scenario than he would have taken it earlier. Rook c8. Now even another pawn, so he's up 4 pawns. This is just crushing at this point with like the c-file power and black not playing c5 earlier on. But I did want to show one last thing in this game. After rook c2, b4, knight g5, a4. Now this is what I thought was very important. He did a4. Now why this is important instead of f4 is actually really, really interesting. So I actually learned from this maneuver that Mason tried to do into a game I think I played later with a blitz game, and I think it's very informational or very important for people to know this. So let's say if he did f4. No, let's look at this first. The evaluation is 3.29. If we do f4, it's a draw. So Mason tried to do a trick in this position, and if it worked, Pillsbury would have totally got a draw and a completely won game. Because why? Is you have to do knight f3. This knight f3 and rook c2, rook d2 maneuver is such an important drawing maneuver that it's important to know for your future games. So if he goes king f1, then you can just go rook d2. And this rook d2 knight here is just an infinite perpetual. Because what happens is, let's say he goes knight c4, you just do knight x h2, and if he ever goes to e1, you do knight check, and he has to go back, and you just keep repeating. Or if he goes g1, you have the same maneuver, and he has to go to f1, because if he goes to h1, rook h2 is checkmate. So this would have been a really cool perpetual trick, but he did not get it. So we continued, knight e4, a5, knight take on f2, and see, it almost looks like he's doing this thing on h3 to get a trick. But if you look, this a pawn is just promoting, and there is no way to do anything after with knight h3. This is where black resigned, rightfully so. Actually, I think he resigned at a6. Resigned at a6. This is where black resigns, and rightfully so, as there's no way to stop white from promoting, and the knight in this position can never give perpetual like it could on f3. Knight f3 with rook c2 d2 endeavor is just way more powerful than knight e4 or knight h3 in these lines. So very nice play by Pillsbury. Just wanted to show the ending there with you guys. Now we will show a second game from even a more well-known master, and I know a lot of people's favorites. We are going to show a game from Havasi and Capablanca in 1929. This is the second game, and this is a Nimzo structure. I know a lot of people love the Nimzo. No, but we are going to go from the black side. A lot of people love the Queen's Indian against the Nimzo. Well, yeah, it's the Nimzo. And so I know a lot of people will enjoy watching this. So d4, knight f6, c4, e6, getting pressure, maybe even this bishop b4, c5, d5, knight c3, bishop b4, queen c2, d5. Starting with a typical Nimzo, and we see the great Capablanca as black. He crushed so many people with the Queen's Indian, and I really loved this game that he played. So knight f3, c5, pushes c5, as you should in most d5 structures. And it almost looks contradictory because you're allowing a3, but it's actually very. Oh yeah, let me turn off eval. It's actually it's a very influential idea. Because even though you may get the isolated d pawn, you're at least getting this c file for potential rook, potential b6, knight c6, getting that d4 pawn out of here. So he does cx d5, and instead of doing it says this is an inaccuracy, but really it's still pretty equal, and it's a very I think common idea in some of these ways if they do cx d5 that you can take the queen. And I thought it was genius, to be honest, because instead of ex d5 and dx c5 getting stuck with the IQP isolated queen pawn, which you can play it and it's still very good for black or very equal, but he does it with queen x d5, exploiting this pin and kind of making it weird to move as white. So so if we want to look at the isolated queen's pawn, ex d5, dx c5, but no, this is actually really interesting. I bet Kappa, of course, saw this, but instead of taking this pawn, which you can do, you can push d4 and get into an exciting game. After a3, bishop a5, still having this pin, b4, they take. It's very a very chaotic game. But he almost keeps it almost like a little simple. And with this like queen x d5, we'll see how he exploits this later. a3, bishop x c3, bx c3, doesn't take with the queen. Knight c6, e3, and he kind of like makes it like you see this bishop pinned in, and the structure's good in some way, but it's a little for now. We castle, goes bishop e2, cx d4. I thought cx d4 was actually really like a great move because and like another positional kind of like dubious but like genius move because now the c file will either be opened or the e file by whatever choice he does with whatever pawn, and of course if he takes with a knight, the pawn will still be opened. So he takes with the c, allowing the c file pressure, which kind of makes sense because if you take with e, you're already maybe a little bit scared of this king out in the open. So we see cx d4, cx d4, and then b6, and knight d2, which I thought was a really cool move. Another like inaccuracy, but inaccuracies can be fun, and you can play them in some games. Because if you take, just want to show everyone, if you take on g2, they can do bishop f3, exploiting this, and this is just completely lost. So, does bishop f3, or he did bishop b7, and then bishop f3 now, queen d7. And it was weird to me that he allowed this after bishop b7, but it makes sense because you're connecting the rooks. You're eventually gonna connect the rooks and bring the queen to like d7. So it does make sense. Take a little bit of water. So we go bishop f3, queen d7, castle, rook a c8. Now look at this queen on c2 from like the last game. We're maybe seeing queen c2 can be better, or it can be worse than queen e2, like in some lines. So rook a c8, queen b1, getting like look at this like kind of disgusting situation here, while Kappa looks way more solid and developed in this area. So he does queen b1, knight a5. See, I thought this was interesting too, but you have to think about it too. Like, this is probably one of White's only really active pieces, and by doing knight a5, you're allowing the queen to get slightly more active, and you're taking away his like really powerful piece. So it does make sense a lot. So we keep going. Queen x b7, bishop e2, queen a6, getting it to even more of a more like opening square. Knight d5, rook a2, which it looked counterproductive to me, but it was just hard for Kappa's like opponent to make moves. So then like rook c6, doubling up, but then he does e4, which was kind of like a smart move because you're trying to like open up this bishop, you're trying to give more lines, you're just trying to put pressure. So you go knight c3, exploiting this this rook here and trying to get trade off this. So he does take on c3, rook x c3, knight f3, and then rook f c8. Again, we see the masters understanding the power of doubling the rooks on the c file. h3, knight c4. Kappa in this game does make a little like probably like a few mistakes in this game, like slash misses. But even though that he does, he's still trying to exploit the c file as much as he can, and it's still a beautiful game in its own right for a lot of moments, like how he played that opening kind of beautifully. And even though c4 is a little inaccurate, well, it doesn't prevent d5, which is kind of the counterplay that Havasi's going for. So really, queen d3 would have made more sense as a move. You're preventing d5 from being pushed because after d5, ex d5, ex d, queen x d5, and you can always play knight c4 like later. So it wasn't the best move at the moment, but it does make sense because you're just trying to get as much like activity with your pieces as possible. Goes a4, knight a3, just exploiting this queen, making it move. So queen b2, and then queen x a4 again, kind of getting a little greedy, but it kind of does make sense because you're winning a straight pawn and you want to get into an a game and we see Kappa's end games, and we know how good he is in those end games. But knight a3 makes a little bit more sense, or knight c2 makes a little bit more sense, as you obviously can't take the knight. You're hitting this, and after like rook c1, you can just go queen c4, and you see Alkine's gun. If anyone doesn't know, you may want to do this in some of your games. Alkine's gun is 2 rooks and a queen, and it's such a beautiful thing you can do in some positions. Even more c-file pressure. So then we see rook e2, trying to get control of the second rank. See b5, d5, and then ex-d5. In my opinion, I think this is Kappa's biggest mistake in this game. Arguably, he should play the brilliant move rook x f3. And this is just a tactical like KO, because after gx f3, queen d1, rook king g2, the only really move, you can go rook c1, and you have unlimited pressure here. You can't take the knight, and after like a move like f4 to give the king more area, because queen g1 was threatening mate, you still do queen g1, and after queen f3, you go king h1, king e3, and then you can fork, or let's say he goes king g3, which is another move, you go rook g1, king h4, queen h2, and there's no way to really prevent this, or like if he does queen e5 to prevent it, you still go g5, which is such a beautiful move, and after fx g5, because you can't do queen x because rook take, you do queen take. So it's such a beautiful, and like let's say he goes here, this would have been mate. So this would have been a tactical KO after rook x f3, but he doesn't see it, but the game still ends beautifully by Kappa's beautiful play. So ex d5, b4, getting like 2 passed pawns here, protecting these 2 pieces, and you'll see the way he maneuvers. And so after like the mounting pressure, Havasi eventually cracks with queen d2, and after b3, rook b2, he plays the beautiful move. Kappa cashes in with all the c-file that he's been dominating this entire game, and he plays rook c2. So his b-file, his b-pawn idea cashes in, and after here, there's nothing you can really do. Like instead of queen a3, let's say you did rook x c2, you can do like I'm pretty sure you can just do rook here, or wait, is that not the move? I'm sorry. Is that just here and you promote? Yeah, it makes more sense. And you can't really go queen c1 because queen b and then queen b would be demolishing. So he does queen e3, but then he plays a beautiful move rook x b2, and then knight c4, forking the queen and the rook. Queen c1 this is a nice trick, saying, hey, if you take this, you're going to get mated. If we want to see it, this would have lost the game, but instead plays a nice pin and no way to prevent the pawn from promoting or severe material loss. So like let's say he does knight x b2, again queen x c8 would be made, but he does rook b1, trying to get out of the pin, but after queen x c1, white resigns, as this is completely lost, and this is how it would have played out. After rook x c1, b2, rook b1, instead of doing knight a3 and potentially losing your like biggest advantage, you just do rook b8 and then prepare a3, and there's no way to stop it after king f1, knight a3, and that concludes the analysis of another great master using the c-file. Now we will go to my game where I try to imitate the c-file lesson. So the power of the c-file series, we're going to see a lot of that. We're going to see 2 beautiful games from masters, and me trying to exploit it in like a tournament game or non-tournament game. There we go. And this is, I'm not going to say their names just to not disclose, but it's a Colle player, someone that plays the Colle system, and I am ChessMobster, and we'll see how this game goes. So we start off with d4, because I'm a d4 player as myself, and knight f6, knight f3, e6, e3, If one sees, oh yeah, I'm black, so let me go to black. If one sees like these structures with the pawns on dark squares such as e3 and c3, or I mean e3 and d3, sorry, I like to thrust in the center. No, e3 and d4, my bad. But I like to thrust in the center with c5 to weaken the structure, and I've seen masters just play c5, so I just love c5. So he plays c5, he plays b3, get a cool system, go d5, getting the center, preventing c4. Temporarily he can play c4, but I want to grab more and more control over these squares. Does bishop b2, knight c6. Now, I've played this person a lot, and there are scenarios he goes bishop d3, and I go like knight b4. So he does like a prophylactic a3. Is just not wanting knight b4 on the potential d3 bishop, and I do bishop e7. I don't play bishop d6 because I realize that like knight e5 seems stronger with this bishop eyeing it, so there doesn't seem like my bishop is really going to get that much play on d6. So bishop d3, castle. Can't play knight b4. Knight b d2. I play a move I don't really understand why I played. I play h6. I don't even think it's an inaccuracy. It's like an okay move. But to me, I do regret this move now because I feel like it's unnecessary in this position. Feels like a loss of a tempo, and I should be focusing on the c file, which I do later on. Castle b6, knight e5. Now exploiting that this is unprotected. I go bishop b7 though to prepare my bishop and protect my c-pawn. He goes f4, getting so much protection on this knight. If you look at this, it's a beautiful knight. I do queen c7, getting more pressure on this c-file. Now I said like queen c2 can be kind of bad because this rooks can exploit queens on like the c-file, but the c-file isn't opened up yet. And when you think about it, I'm more at threat to open it than he is. He hasn't even played c4. So I like queen c7. Queen f3, I feel like was I mean, it is just a huge mistake. And even in the game, I felt it because sometimes there's moves that just feel off. And you're like, okay, how do I exploit this? Because really, like, if you think about it, if this pawn and this bishop, or this knight aren't here, this bishop is just completely eyeing this queen. So instead of queen f3, he should have done like queen e2, like potentially going for that a6 idea, and then that first game, all these positional ideas carry over, and protecting the c-file. So rook a c8. This is actually, so I make 2 misses in this game, and the misses are huge because they are what the masters would be all like, hey, exploit the c-file. So this is a huge miss. Instead of rook a c8, I should have just gone c4. Because what happens is, and it looks kind of counterproductive when you look at it, because you see how many pieces attacking it? 1, 2, 3, 4, and I only have 1 protecting it. But if you calculate it, it actually is way better for black. So if he does, let's look at every line. If he goes knight x c6, takes before he takes, and I do bishop, he can't take on, oh wait, no. He can't take, sorry. If we do knight x c, bx, he would have to do bishop e2, and then I would get b5 in, and you can't ever take the pawn. It allows me to expand on the queen side, and even though I'm not up pawn in this line, I just have such great, like, control over the queen side, and I would love this position in a tournament. And so, like, let's go back, though, just to make sure. Let's say he takes here. Can't do that in this position if we even look at the eval, because I'm attacking 2 pieces at once, this bishop and this queen, and he can't even go, like bishop here, because I would go, what would I go? I remember looking at this. I think it was like knight x d4 or knight, or no, it was something like, I think it was bishop? No, it was knight take, right? Yeah, it was knight take. And then if he goes knight, I can go f5. No, it's not f5, my bad. I should know this. But let's just look at the line for this one. I'd go c3, attacking both pieces, and then like if he goes bishop c, I would go f5 now. Because I think if I went f5 here, he would just go d5. And after like bishop x d5, he can go queen g3, and he's threatening mate. So c3 displaces this bishop. I didn't fully go into that line. If we go into the other ones though, like knight x e4, so we go back, so we go into this again, and he goes into knight x e4. That's what would have happened. But like, let's say he does bishop x c4 instead of taking this knight. I could do dx c4, and it's such a beautiful move because again I'm attacking both pieces. And after knight x, I go bishop x, and again it's threatening two pieces. So then that's oh no, this is a beautiful one too. So like, let's say he takes with a knight though. After bishop x c3, I have the beautiful move knight x e5, and I'm hitting this twice, and I'm hitting this twice, and the only really move is like f x e c5, and then I take the queen and I'm up a queen. This would have been a little bit hard to play because after like this, I think I can even go like bishop d5, hit this, and if he goes fx, I go queen x, and I'm really only up like basically like 3 points of material. So this would actually be kind of hard to convert, but we could. So that is one miss. I could have gone c4, and again I go rook a. I don't know, what does he go? Sorry. So I go queen c7, queen f3, rook a c8, rook a c1. So he wants to get c-file pressure too. I go a6, and this a6 is another huge miss. I have basically the same idea with c4, because like, let's say knight x c4, bishop x c6, bishop e2, I have b e2, and bx c4, I have dx c4, bx c4, and then or if knight take, but no, it was d5 that I thought was really interesting, because d5 is a nice try by him. So like, he's saying, okay, but you take my bishop, but I take your knight. You go knight a5. So you're still exploiting this pin, and after knight x e4, I go bishop x, and this just, I'm already hitting the queen and hitting this twice, so I'm going to be winning a piece here. But after, like, let's say he goes bishop e5, I can go bishop x f3, and we get into a queen trade that's actually still favors me. Because, look, I'm still hitting this knight, and after he takes, I can just take on g2 and be up a pawn. Because after king x, I can take here, and like, let's say he doesn't take the bishop, goes something like bishop e5, I can bring my I can just take the rook. So that was another chance I had, and I think when I think about this game, I think of the classics and the master screaming at me to play c, and then I eventually play it after queen f3, rook a c8, a6, both misses, but then after c4, I finally hear it, and I plan perfectly from here. I play dx c4, and this is kind of the same idea from the positions from before. And after dx c4, bishop e4, because there's pretty much not that many moves he has, because pretty much no other move really holds on. Because again, if he goes like here, I have knight x c5, sorry. And if he goes like knight, same idea. So pretty much he plays like, after dx c4, he plays the best move, which is bishop e4. I go knight x e4, knight x, oh no, I go f5. Now, I say I play on perfectly. Really, knight x c5 would have made more sense here, because after fx, I can go cx, b3, and be up 2 pawns, and this is just completely winning. But I did like f5, and I thought this is, I mean, still just basically winning, because after knight g3, I just have knight x c5, and if he plays the best move, which is like dx c5, I can still just do fx, and this is just completely demolishing. I have to worry slightly about like this, but I can just do like bishop x c5 and protect it on from c7. So after knight g3, I go knight x c5, hitting this queen, and after queen h5, knight d3, hitting both these pieces. He has to kind of let loose with one. From here, I just really convert. And after he actually gets a nice little trick, and then he traps this knight. But again, I'm up like 6 points of material. I'm threatening mate here. And after queen c2, protecting and hitting, I go knight a4. At least I already know I'm going to lose this knight. If we look at this, I can't go here because queen, like I can't go in any of these squares. So I realized if I'm going to lose this knight, this isn't important for everyone to know. Sometimes you just sack it the best way you can, which I just sack it on a4, and he takes, I go queen x. Again, the c file is just, these pawns are just going to move forward. If he ever takes, which he does, I get rook x c5, and if he ever took, I would have had bishop, and these bishops would have been beautiful. But after rook fc1, rook fc8, we just still see the c-file pressure, even in the process of conversion. Rook xc5, rook xc5, bishop xc5, knight f1, and then we were pretty much winning this from a while. But after knight f1, we have a really nice win with queen x exploiting this pin. He can't take because it's illegal. And after queen x e4, g3, we go queen e4, this beautiful bishop battery threatening mate, and it's very hard to do anything here. White resigns here, and if we look at the eval, it's just he has no really moves here to really do. And this concludes the first set of the Power of the C-File series. This is a set of 3 games focused on a few d4 structures. The Colle in this one, the Nimzo with Capablanca, / Queen Zinnia, and Queen's Gambit Declined. And the next set will explicitly focus on French games, as white and black. Like, well, I play one as black and get absolutely demolished, and I really do lose to the almighty C-File. And in the third game of, I really learned from that. And we'll see some beautiful masters playing with the French, from black and white. And I'm going to keep doing this format for now, the Power of the C-File, and with 2 classical games from past masters and 1 game from me. It was good to do this with you guys, and I hope to do this in the future. And we'll see even another series other than the Power of the C-File. And love you, chess dogs, and ChessMobster out!